One. Hi and welcome. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Angela.
Thanks everyone for joining today. Hi, Leslie. Thank you for joining. So, today, welcome to Building Better Relationships at Home and at Work with Patty and Angela. And today, we're introducing a topic that I know you and I, Patty, have worked on this a lot. But we're talking about when to say yes and when to say no. So, Patty, if you don't mind, I thought we could start with you sort of talking about, do you remember how we actually came up with the topic? Was there a specific thing that comes to mind for you, or was it something in the workplace that happened?
This is a topic that's kind of dear to my heart because when you're trying to do work-life balance or life balance, saying no is a key factor in being successful in your life. And how this came about was you and I were talking about balance and how to say no because it's very challenging in all of our lives on when to say yes and when to say no. So that's how it came about is you and I were actually talking about work and home life situations and how we always say yes or no and when to say yes and no.
Right.
When is it okay to say yes and when is it okay to say no? And how do you say no?
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of people don't know how to say no, and they just say yes to everything and get overwhelmed and stressed and constantly going and moving towards burnout. So that's why we came up with the topic because a lot of people struggle with this, especially people pleasers.
yes, and neither you or I fall into that category, do we? No, no, no.
Oh yeah. And so there has to be some boundaries set and also knowing yourself, knowing what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and being okay with saying no instead of saying yes. We get asked to do something and we're helpful people and we want to help everybody, but you're not helping yourself. You do need time for you and you do need to do things that you want to do, not feel like you have to do because you said yes. It's okay. It's okay to say, right at this moment, I'm sorry, I can't commit right now. Thank you for thinking of me. And being okay with it afterwards and not beating yourself up because you said no.
Yeah, I think that's where, for me, saying no was actually, I think I've said this before, but I was like the Fonz from Happy Days. You know, the Fonz?
Yeah.
And he couldn't say, I'm sorry. He could go, zzz, zzz, or I love you. He'd go, I love. And for me, that was the word no. I'd be like, no, for me, saying no, I actually had to practice this with a teacher of mine once, and it was so traumatizing. So, in that exercise, and I mean, you could try this, we put a circle around me, and the teacher would come towards that circle, which was a rope around me, about 1.5 meters diameter, and she would give me the pillow, and I would have to say no. And that was so hard for me, and it stayed with me, that practice, because it was so hard and it was so physical and so demonstrative. That stayed with me all my life. I've actually got it in my book. Actually, thanks, Vivian. That was the best experience I've had with saying no and realizing how in my wiring actually saying the word no was beaten out of me. I teach coaches as well, and I tell them that children are not taught to say no because when they go through that no phase, their parents go through this whole drama with them. And then eventually, once they've gone through the no phase, which happens around 2, 3, 4, they then go to school, which beats out no. And so today, Patty, you're really skilled at saying no in a real graceful way. So I'm going to give you some examples today. We're going to use some classic examples where people struggle with saying no, and conversely also with saying yes. So I wanted to bring this up, the piece about when to say yes, because in particular, I've had an entrepreneur's life for most of my adult life after studying. And Patty, you've worked a lot with 9 to 5. You've also worked as an entrepreneur, but predominantly you've worked in leadership in that 9 to 5 environment. One of the things I learned as an entrepreneur was, how do I say yes to what I want? So there's a problem of not being able to say no, but it's like, but how do I know what I want to say yes to? And as an entrepreneur, I struggled with that for a very long time, so that I couldn't work out how to prioritize my schedule, or what was the best way to do that, and what was important and what was not. So one of the struggles I had, not just saying no, but was, what do I say yes to? And what I discovered with that is that until I worked out a structure as an entrepreneur of what are the big pieces, the priorities, and how does Angela work with them? Because in a 9 to 5 environment, you're given really strong restrictions about, you have to do this by this time, and these are your job duties. As an entrepreneur, you kind of have to do that structure as well, but it's so open, it's so creative. So I struggled a lot with my creativity and how to structure that. So that's one of the things I would like to ask you in terms of saying yes. With how do you say yes when we're looking at the work environment now, when you're in that 9 to 5 environment? Some of the things that you were sharing with me, Patty, in the 9 to 5 environment is that there are several situations that come up, but can you give some examples that come to mind for you where people might struggle with how to set their priorities? How do they say yes to what they need to do in order to do their job and also be themselves?
Well, you have to know what is important to your job function and what needs to be done. And I'll give you a scenario. Say that you're an IT person and you have a client and you have this project that you've been working on, and the client comes to you and says, I want to add something else on, but you haven't completed the other part of the project yet, and they're wanting to shift gears and put you and have you go this way. You can say yes, but say to them, I still need to finish this first. I need this amount of time to get this finished so that it's finished, and then we can move on to the next thing. So you're not saying you're saying yes, but you're not saying yes at that moment in time. You're saying, okay, I need another 3 weeks to complete the tasks that you've already asked me for. And then after I finish that, I can move on to your next task. Is that acceptable to you? And you're putting it on them, saying, yes, I either want to complete this or I want you to stop and start working on this. But to be effective, you always want to finish what you were already starting, because later on that may cause a problem that you didn't finish what you already started.
Right.
And more tasks start coming on top of you, and then you never get back to finishing what you started, which is important to your client as well. That's what they hired you to do. So you need to be able to set boundaries and say, let's focus on this and finish this, and then I can move on to doing this for you. And then you don't feel so overwhelmed and stressed because you finished one task, or project or assignment, and now you can move on to the next one.
Right.
Now, say that you're a 9-to-5er and you're working on your work-life balance strategies, and you want to leave work right at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Somebody comes into your cube or your office and wants to chit-chat. And your partner or your child is waiting for you at home, and you've made a promise, I'm going to leave right at 5 o'clock. How do you politely say to your coworker or your boss, I'm leaving for the day? So you politely say, oh, I'm leaving now. How about we get together tomorrow at such and such time, 8 a.m., and you can fill me in. I really need to go. And you say it politely, and you walk out. Now, I've heard of strategies where you say, oh, you can walk me to my car.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. Why is that dangerous? Because they're chit-chatting and following you in the car. You get in the car and they're still talking to you. How you're letting them continue the chit-chat. So it's better if you stop it right at 5 o'clock instead of them following you to your car, because then you're going to have to, turn on your engine, roll up the window, and that then you feel guilty when you're driving home. So
the person's still talking and you're driving away.
Yeah. So we've all had that where somebody at the last minute all of a sudden wants to chit chat, whether it's innocent or it's on purpose, and you're trying to get out the door. So I recommend that you stand firm, because if you stand firm and say, oh, I'm sorry, I got to leave today, but I'll meet with you tomorrow at such and such time, if that works for you in your calendar. I'll see you tomorrow. And you say it politely, and you're setting that standard.
Yeah. So it's fascinating, Patty, because what you're describing is your body language is like you're packing your desk, you're getting your handbag or your briefcase, and the person's still yabbering, and you're like, everything about my body's like, I'm out of here, because like I got a life at home, right, or outside of this office, but they're, whatever reason, they're not listening. And I think that's what gets people frustrated, when people don't get their body language saying, no, not now. And they kind of have a judgment, some people, I shouldn't have to tell you I'm out of here, can't you read my body language? I've heard a lot of people gripe about that. But the simple matter is that that person could be just in their own planet. They could have had they'd be de-stressing from the day, it's 5 o'clock, and their body clock is knowing that somehow they're meant to be leaving the work environment, but they're not making that transition. So what you just shared about, I'm sorry, or not even I'm sorry, thank you, but I'm leaving now. I can meet you tomorrow if that works with your schedule. Bye. That's actually helping their energy get a really clear, like, okay. Because sometimes they're not aware of your body language. They're in some other zone and not reading your signals. So
right.
That's really helpful, like the very framed, the language about directing time. There's another one I wanted to share with people for the entrepreneurs, which I found really fascinating. I mean, some people who do entrepreneur work very creatively, but without a sense of time, like you're sharing, Patty, about 5 o'clock, this is done, so now the next activity can happen, like going to my car. If entrepreneurs don't have a structure like that, I've noticed that their whole life turns into a mishmash and a chaotic mess. And one of the things that happened for me was, especially if you work at home and you have family or a partner, they may not also respect your work. They don't know if you don't have an office, like with a closed door, and it's like I'm working now, if you're more fluid, which a lot of people, depending on where you live, you might have a more open space. In my case, I often shared the main area where I worked with my partner, so we have a combined shared space. So unless I verbally said, well, I'm working now, or I told my partner, when you come home, I'm actually working, I'm going to be working in that room and don't open the door, I have to give really strict instructions. And a funny thing happened in my relationship, which forced me to become very clear about the structure as an entrepreneur. Like I ended up developing, I'll share the method I use to develop a structure for my creative work. Because some creatives resent, like they want open time and free time, and it depends on your personality, but this may resonate for some of the people. But what happened to force me to create a structure was that I noticed my partner at the time was very critical of my work. So, what have you been doing all day? Was a classic phrase I got. Or, why haven't you done this? Or, why haven't you made the bed? I'm not really a good bed maker. I kind of do the bed when it's sort of inspired. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And also, I just got a lot of criticism about my work, and I found this really interesting. And then I realized that the main core reason was that I wasn't saying yes to the importance and the value of my work. I think in the work
Have a structure and giving them a structure as well. Like for me right now, I have a sign that I put on my office door in that I work from home. And when family sees that sign with the door closed, they know not to come in. They know that I'm working. And one time I forgot to take it off. And my husband followed the boundaries. And so I know it works. So like if you have like a little sign maybe in the living room, Angela's working, or I'm working, just make sure you flip it over when you're not. But that seemed to work for me, because then everybody knows, oh, she's on a coaching call, or she's on a Facebook Live, or she's working on something that she doesn't want to be disturbed.
Yeah.
So Angela, how did you set up your boundaries or schedule to succeed?
One thing I did was, because I write and I wasn't valuing the writing part as much, I actually said there would be 2 days where I did session work, and then there would be 3 days where I did 1 day work in the business, 2 days writing. So my Fridays became my accounting day, or my getting everything tallied and from the results of the week. Monday would be marketing and writing. Wednesdays would be writing, program development, and Tuesdays and Thursdays were my session days. And then I also put on my Saturdays intermittently if I wanted to do live workshops, which was really interesting, because now my partner also happens to have work on Saturdays. So odd things started to happen so I put the schedule in place, Patty, but I still had issues with my partner at the time. But my current partner, I don't. And the really clear thing to me now is that because I really value my work completely differently, I see my work as very powerful, as very important, and of a high standard, a high quality to me and others. So that really changed the way my partner was responding to the work. And then consequently, my partner also magically seems to have things on when I have work scheduled. So things seem to flow better as well when I see the value. So the structure was really important, because it got to work on me physically first when I had those days. And I also saw those little sabotage things that you might do, like, oh, I know Wednesday's writing day, but I'll do something else. And that was fascinating, because I got to see what are the beliefs that make you say no to what you really want to do? What is that perception of my work when I said no to writing? And conversely, when I really stuck to it and started to write, the speed of what I was doing was very fast. So look at that for the entrepreneurs out there. If you set up a structure and you're avoiding it, you're saying no to something. What is it that you're saying no to? Why are you saying no?
Right.
Because something's going on.
If it's something that you really need to do with your work and it's important to your work, but you keep putting it to the side and you're not getting it done, that causes more stress and anxiety on you. So if you do it first thing and get it done on something that you don't want to do or you don't like to do, if you get that done first, that's gone, and then you can focus on things that you want to do. Say you have an assignment or a project and you have a deadline. Waiting till the last minute, the last day, and then say that you need something from somebody else and you're putting pressure on them too, and you're panicking. If you have a project, you should be working it, a couple hours a day, every day, and having it done before the deadline. That way, if something transpires where you need something from somebody else, you're not putting anxiety on them as well and causing chaos. Working those things that you don't want to do but you have to do is real important in getting them done, and then you don't have to worry about them anymore. And you're free to work and be creative on other things that you like to do as well. So saying, we all know the projects that we have to do that we don't enjoy, but it's part of the job. Getting it done, getting it finished, and then moving on to what you like to do.
So Patti, can you share, like in the 9-to-5 environment, what have you noticed as also, you mentioned some things that you don't like to do, but one thing that comes to mind of situations you've shared is that, say you're on a project or you've got a task and you're working in a group environment and there's people around you that are pulling you in different directions.
Yeah.
Is that
you really need to set your boundaries and say, you know what, use your Outlook calendar and block it out so that people know that you're not available and that you need to work on that. Say somebody comes into your cube or your office and says to you, I need to talk to you now. And you're working on this difficult project that you have to concentrate. If you set boundaries and say, is this urgent, drop dead urgent, or can this wait until 3:00 this afternoon when I'm available? Or you have one-on-one meetings with them weekly, and is it something that can wait for that one-on-one meeting with them? If you communicate, you can, I am your team, and say, I'm working on this, I'm going to be unavailable for a couple hours. And they all, I am back, instant message. Okay, then they understand from this time to this time you're unavailable because you're working on something that's, important or urgent. If you communicate well, people will be receptive to it. Now you may have somebody that doesn't follow those boundaries and will push those boundaries, which we've all had. You need to be firm. You need to tell them, I'm going to be from this period to this period. You're going to have to wait, or you're going to need to go to somebody else and ask them because I'm doing this. And you can say it in a polite way, but once people realize that you stick to your schedules and your boundaries, they will comply, and actually they know what's expected, and you've communicated well and you're clear.
interesting. Yeah, so I'm thinking a lot also about, well, when I work at home with my partner coming in and out, we use texting to tell each other in
Yes.
the same way, the instant message. So I just wanted to touch, before we go on to our next piece, which is one of my favourite topics about saying no, is procrastination. But what have you learned from office dramas, like that suddenly there's a big drama, a bomb's dropped, and people are expecting you to also respond to that, and you've actually got maybe a task to do, or you've got a certain priority in your day. What have you noticed, that is that a test on, like, is that one of the tests you're saying, like in the office environment? I mean, I love this television series, The Office, because they're just constantly trying to distract each other because the job's really awful, right? But I also notice that in the work environment, people enact dramas sometimes because it's emotional.